Welcome to a new definition of love. And here we are once again coming back at you with all the fine elements of music and enjoyment for everyone here. I'm hoping everyone is sitting down, relaxing, and having themselves a real good time because we're about to take you on a new journey.
To all my poets in Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Cincinnati, Columbus, New York, Harlem, Queens, Brooklyn, this one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. And all my poets in LA, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, San Fran, Washington, DC, Houston, this one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. Check it out, it goes. We've been trying to get through your subconscious in the form of this music for years. Knocking on the doors of your ear. Have no fear. I'm here to save you from that blazing hip-hop and R&B that seems to have you hostage. Captivated by these videos, soft porn, the music. I'm here to diffuse all that nonsense that seems to make sense in dollars. And if you hear me holler, cause I've had it up to here, let me clear my throat, cause all the rhymes I wrote seem to never got any attention until I said I did poetry. And we took it from the block to the coffee shop, from the coffee shop to HBO, from HBO to Broadway. Now people stand in line to hear the words I say. So one late autumn afternoon I had a vision that this would happen, cause to me poetry is the same thing as rapping. Denver, Philly, Vegas, St. Louis, Charlotte, Richmond, Memphis, Phoenix, New Orleans. Yeah, this one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. And all my poets in Pittsburgh, Nashville, Dallas, New Jersey, Dayton, Youngstown, Buffalo, Diego, Miami. This one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. Check it out, it goes. And now, spoken words are recited from coast to coast. Yo, I'm an MC, I'm not your host. And don't even ask me about how I feel about the state of hip-hop today. Let's talk about aerosol cans, let's talk about DJs, let's talk about B-boys and MCs. MCs. You can freestyle all day, but sooner or later you gotta write something down. I said sooner or later you gotta write something down and tell me what you're gonna sound like when the music goes off. Somebody please tell me what you're gonna sound like when the music goes off. Please tell me what you're gonna sound like when the music goes off. Nothing, just a brother with a mic, trying to get it right. And at night we gather in small groups of intellect just to put you check on your tainted brand of this thing called rap music. Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Cincinnati, Columbus, New York, Harlem, Queens, Brooklyn. Yo, this one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. With all my poets in LA, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, San Fran, Washington, DC, Houston. Yeah, this one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. Denver, Philly, Vegas, St. Louis, Charlotte, Richmond, Memphis, Phoenix, New Orleans. This one's for you. Schoolhouse say peace to you. With all my poets in Pittsburgh, Nashville, Dallas, New Jersey, Dayton, Youngstown, Buffalo, Diego, Miami. This one's for you. It's just a new definition of love.
This is the Akron Community Podcast Lab listening party. I am Angie Higgins with BU Podcasting Company of Akron, Ohio. I am co-founder and program coordinator.
Give it up for Angie, ladies and gentlemen. All right. My name is Ace, and I'm a Libra. Just thought I'd share that. My name is Ace. I'm a co-founder and program coordinator for BU Podcasting Company. Welcome to Akron, Ohio. Welcome to the beautiful Summit Art Space. We decided to do this in an art space just so you know what we're dealing with. Go ahead.
And just a little bit about the art space. You see behind us and all around us the Y. They are celebrating 150 years of service to Akron, Ohio, where you can come down from 12 to 5 Friday and Saturday. Just to get that out there real quick. BU Podcasting Company is what myself and Ace Epps came up with to give podcasters a network to present stories that you don't usually hear. We have African American stories from empowering women, intellectual, or just anything that you can think of. Right? All right, you about that? All right.
And the great thing about it, you guys, is that BU Podcasting Company is an opportunity to be able to spread different stories and, most importantly, be able to put a spotlight on the Black interest here in Akron. So it's an honor to be able to partner with the Futuro Media Group. Give it up, give it up. It's an awesome, we are absolutely, and I sincerely means we are absolutely grateful to be able to do that. I want to shout out the Summit Art Space for allowing us to be here. Also, the Double Strip for putting us out there, and just thank you. So coming to the mic right now is the CEO of Futuro. All right, she's from New York. She just got off the plane. I'm gonna let her tell you exactly what it is. I'm grateful for you to be here, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for Erika.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna take off my mask just so everybody knows I'm alone up here, 6 feet from everybody else right now. And for the rest of the night, as people are speaking, we've got a setup here so that they can be 6 feet apart, except for our 2 podcasters who are brothers-in-law, and they're the same family. So, they're married to sisters. All the germs they got are already, mixed up together. So we're not worried about that. But I wanted to thank all of you for tuning in tonight, for being here tonight. And I cannot tell you how proud we at Futuro Media are of this Akron Podcast Lab. This is a program that we started in Boston 3 years ago, and it was built out of the belief that people should own their stories of their neighborhoods, of their communities, and of themselves. And that in a lot of media, people were not being allowed to say who they were and what they were. Stories were being told for them, that people were speaking into the mic for communities, and that they would drop in, helicopter in, think they knew what was going on, and then helicopter out. And this happened mostly with underserved communities and communities of color. So we wanted to do something to change the narrative, and that's why we started the Podcast Lab. Futuro Media has been around for 11 years, and it was started by Maria Hinojosa, who some of you probably know from CNN or PBS or CNBC or MSNBC. She's on everything, and she is a pioneering journalist who decided to start her own company to tell the stories of people of color. And that's why we're here today, because she started that organization. I'm really excited that we have some great stories from Akron. I can't wait to hear a little bit about them. And, someone had asked a while ago, why Akron? And there were a couple of reasons why we decided to come to Akron. One was we looked for communities that had not just a strong POC population, but a strong, rich history. And we looked for places that had strong arts communities, people who were helping to lift up what was being done in underserved communities, and particularly in communities of color, and also who had the desire and the vibrancy and the interest in getting their stories out there and letting people know who they were, and also an intense pride in where they were. And Akron checked all of those boxes. So I want to let you get to the Podcast Lab, and I would like to introduce, most importantly, the leader of this lab, who has had so many ideas, brought up so many interesting things, who has taught our team through her background in acting and TV and podcasting, and who really has been the heart of this project and this process. So Ella Turenne, I want you to come up and introduce the first podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm going to sit over here. So I'm going to put this here real quick. And can you all hear me? Yep. Okay, great. So welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. Before we get started, we have a special message from none other than the mayor of Akron, Ohio. And we're going to play that for you all now. He's going to welcome us.
Well, good evening. This is Akron Mayor Dan Horgan, and first I'd like to congratulate all of you on your achievement with the Akron Podcast Lab. Storytelling, as many of you know, is a powerful tool, and it's there to influence and teach us and also inspire. Telling a story often forges that connection among people, no matter what their backgrounds are. And I think centering those stories on people of color is vital in celebrating not only their unique stories, but I think they also become our unique stories as a society and as a city. So all of your achievements, your struggles, and each one of you is going to have an opportunity to tell those stories tonight. So congratulations again on the achievement of the Akron Podcast Lab. Hope to see y'all soon.
right. Thank you so much, Mayor, for welcoming us. And I'm so excited to be here in Akron. I feel like an honorary Akronite with what I've learned and the community that's been built here over the past several months. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out and thanks again to Erika, to Matt from Futuro, and also our audio engineer, Joaquin. Please give them a hand. These are my co-conspirators, I would say, and their support has meant so much throughout these past months. And I also want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Angie and Ace, who have been our literal rock through this whole process. Thank you so much. So the podcasts you are about to hear are a culmination of 4 months of thinking, dreaming, critiquing, and most of all, community building. And this community part is really critical and central to this whole process, and I would say probably the main ingredient to the sauce of this mix that we have been creating. On top of just the sheer genius of each of these amazing people I've had the pleasure to work with, each has brought passion, thought, and care to the lab. Each week, we would come together over Zoom, which is already an interesting place to be in this sphere. But we would come together to listen to stories, to tell stories, to share stories with each other, to share concerns and thoughts about what we wanted to put out in the world. We got together to support each other in that process, to ensure that our stories were going out in the world in a way that really represented this community and that represented each person in the lab authentically. So I'm so proud, and I'm actually more humbled than anything to have been part of this process, to have been part of this group. And tonight you'll get to experience just a taste of the power of what this group has to offer. We're going to be playing tonight a teaser of each podcast, which will be 2 to 3 minutes of each person's work. And you can hear the entire podcast. Each one is about 20 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes or so. They will be posted online so that you can get the full experience. And I definitely encourage you to. Each one will take you on a very distinct journey, as you are about to hear. I just want to also say that at this time, as we continue to fight for Black lives, that what we are doing tonight, what each of these Akron podcasters have done, it's so essentially important at this time, and it matters so much to myself and to each one of us in the lab, and hopefully it'll impact you even as you hear just a small piece of it. So without further ado, what I'm gonna do is introduce each podcast, and then I'm going to have the creator of the podcast join me here, social distancing, and then I'm going to ask them a few questions so that you can get sort of like the insider scoop on what their process was, what their inspiration was, and you can get to really know who they are. So the first one I'm going to introduce is the Sticks and Stones podcast by Charlee.
Hello, welcome to the Sticks and Stones podcast. My name is Charlee Denise Harris, and what you hear is me gearing up to meet a man in a park. I know. It's not what you think. Let me explain. So let me take you back. A few months ago, I was talking with one of my friends, and he was packing. He was getting ready to go on a trip. So I said, where are you going? And he says, oh, you don't know nothing about where I'm going. And so I'm like, well, what is it? And he goes, well, I'm going camping. And, you know, Black girls don't know anything about camping. And I was just like, huh. Now, most of y'all know we got to read people all the time. We got to read people about the things they say about our hair. We have to read people when they try to make it seem like we have attitude problems. So in this specific moment, I just didn't feel like the read. So I just kind of laughed it off and got off the phone. But I started thinking later on, like, yo, why didn't he think that I would know about camping? Like, why didn't I read him? I should have. But after calming down, I thought more about the topic and said to myself, well, why is this a thing? Why do people believe that Black people don't know anything about camping and the great outdoors? So I started just doing research on it. And I kind of discovered that there is a huge diversity gap in the whole nature industry or the great outdoors industry. And it just got me thinking, why? For the next 2.5 hours, as a group, we walked and learned about different tree species. We learned about different birds.
These are red-winged blackbirds. And I'm looking for a black-capped chickadee.
We connected with nature, and it was a beautiful thing.
Cardinal.
Cardinals are very popular to the area.
They are. They're more shy than anything.
But the overwhelming lesson that I take away from it all is letting go of the fear that's always been attached to Black people in outdoor spaces.
Don't be nervous, Lynette.
And truly just trying to experience something.
Yep.
He's nervous. Oh my God, he almost did it.
Charlee Harris, to hear why you're going to have to listen to the whole podcast. But congratulations. I just so love even this snippet, and having listened to your entire podcast, you take us to different places, whether it be through your day or on other journeys that I won't reveal that are in the podcast. But I really love how thoughtful you are, and I do think this podcast is your read of that answer. So you did read him. It's your read. So I want to ask you, how do you think your podcast can help give people a fuller understanding of Black life? Because that's one of the things that you start off with by talking about how people make assumptions about Black people, about Black women in particular. What do you feel like your podcast will contribute to helping open that conversation up?
Well, I believe that part of having understanding is knowledge about what we go through as Black people in these natural spaces. So I believe that with my podcast, what I really try to do a good job about is detailing that experience, so that with both knowledge and understanding, we can kind of break down some of those barriers that we face when we as Black folks enter natural spaces.
And what was it like to, in the process of making this, you were in these natural spaces. What did that feel like to not only be telling that kind of story, but to be in the element as well?
I think it felt really good because, we have so much that we can learn from the grand structure of the outdoors and its natural gifts. And if we take what we learn from that, we can apply it to our lives and truly nourish our bodies. So it is really a good experience to be one with nature and walk and get to know people, and everybody's connecting, and it was just a really great experience.
And obviously you're here in Akron, where there are lots of great open spaces. What do you feel like this contribution is making, and how will it, pull in other Black folks? Do you think that are you hoping that other people will want to explore the outdoors more, or?
Yeah, I think because growing up here, maybe there was one park that I went to. And we have so many really great Summit Metro parks here. And I think, if anything, it would just encourage people to see them all of them, and really experience them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Charlee. We're looking forward to hearing the rest of your podcast. You're going to be continuing on?
Yes, I really, 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 really intend on doing that.
Okay, excellent. Before you go, for each participant, we have some gifts. An amazing headphone set which you're going to need more of as you do more podcasts. We also have a certificate for each participant, just to signal and congratulate you on completing the podcast, and just a piece of art from me. Nice. So thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Congratulations. Okay, our next podcaster is going to be John Smith, and we're going to listen to his podcast called The Aspiring Intellectual.
I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Langston Hughes, 1925. What does the conversation of diversity, equity, inclusion have to do with who we are today? Today's topic and discussion is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the misdirection of the conversation. Is it for us, those of the underclass, to have a conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion, or is it for the elite class to have a conversation about equity and inclusion with those who are representatives of the underclass? Or even better, what qualifies a person to sit at the table, have a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion? On today's episode of The Aspiring Intellectual, we will delve deep into the understanding of what it means to sit at the table.
Well, I am sitting here at the table with Brother Professor John Smith. I have to give you all your honorifics.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I love how you start off this podcast by bringing in the elders, by bringing in the voices of the intellectuals who matter to us, who we cherish so much. You bring in Hughes later on in your podcast. You bring in Baldwin. Why is it important for you to bring these voices in? And why do you think it's so important to have these kinds of intellectual conversations?
So that we can connect to the knowledge and the historical representation of the intellectual. Here in Akron, we have such a rich history. And I don't think that many people realize, like during the Harlem Renaissance, a lot of people worked here that made their bones in art. But they came here and worked in the factories. You had Paul Robeson, who played for the Akron Pros. And we know him to be a great orator.
Great orator.
And to know that he played for Akron, to know that Marcus Garvey came here and debated, to know that Langston Hughes used to come here and visit the Diamond Grill, and and at times to know our history where they were even denied access to certain things. But when you know that these intellectuals walk these lands, you have to pay homage.
I love how you make this super specific, that even though these are voices who we know who have impacted Black folks all across this country, that you're bringing the specificity to how they actually walked through and impacted Akron. Why was that a choice that you made? Why do you think that's important?
They say if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I think we, as people of color, we have such a rich history, and it's not taught to us. And therefore, we lose it. So, I'll give you a great example. We have John Brown, right? John Brown is part of the fabric of our war, right? The Civil War, the war. And to know that his home was right down the street connects us to not only his adventures, but also to Mary Ellen Pleasant, who was his I would say sponsor, so to speak. And to know that she was a millionaire, and this is a black woman in San Francisco. You know, that transcends boundaries and places that we're not taught about in school. I didn't know these people until I got to college. And, you know, so when you look at public education and you look at the history of public education, and you realize that these things are missing because I missed them. They weren't taught to me. So as a leader in the community or a voice in the community, you need to connect there, you know, so that you don't raise young people to follow in the wrong footpath or into your footpath, but into the footpaths that you wish to exist.
So, Professor John Smith, what are some of the other topics that we have to look forward to from your podcast? You start off with diversity and equity, which obviously is a hot button topic these days. So you start off powerfully, but what are some of the other things that we should expect?
Well, I like to push buttons. So
yes, I noticed that.
So I think a few years ago we had the LGBTQ community had a parade here. And I think we don't have enough conversation about the politics in the LGBTQ community. And we separate ourselves. I'd like to talk on that. And I'd also like to talk about the history. Like I said, Marcus Garvey debated here. You know, Paul Robeson lived here. You know, to know these things, it gives me a book of information to talk about. So I like to just push every button I can. Well, I definitely want to start talking about city politics and the history of it, you know, and where it came from, how we got to this point, where we're going, you know, and what we can do as a people to change, you know, the dynamic.
Well, thank you so much. I can definitely say that with your podcast, class is in session.
Yes, definitely.
So please tune in to The Aspiring Intellectual. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next podcast actually features two hosts. I will introduce them afterwards, but the podcast for now is called Black Super Dads.
Hello, this is Dominic.
Hi, and this is RaJohn.
And welcome to the Black Super Dads podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about life, history, arts, culture, society, and we do it through the lens of Black fatherhood, but most importantly, through the lens of comic books. I think kind of our marquee phrase of this whole thing is comic books be out here.
So our goal here is to use our love of comic books and fantasy and entertainment and use that medium to talk about what could be. As young Black fathers, we want to leave a blueprint for our children, one that's unburdened by the societal limitations and implicit bias that we impose upon ourselves and sometimes that are explicitly imposed upon us. Really want to leave a legacy of Black hope and leave our kids something more than just a last name.
Dad, I love you.
Today we're just going to give you a brief snapshot of kind of three topics, and that's going to be resources, representation, and reparations. And you're probably asking yourself, what does that have to do with comic books? But we'll get there. Dom, I'll let you kind of kick it off. What would you do if you had unlimited resources?
If I had unlimited resources, I would give myself the opportunity to fail. To have big dollars, big relationships, big networks, so I could try wild ideas and not be afraid that if they didn't go well, that I would never get that opportunity again, right? One of the things me and you've talked about before is the guy who started GoPro. If any of you guys don't know, his family has the kind of wealth where he just got to travel the world for like 9 months and go surfing and find himself. And one day he was surfing and he was like, man, I really wish I could just like film what I was doing. And the next thing you know, GoPro, right? So that ability to have the kind of resources where I can just find myself and find something. And if, you know, that multi-million-dollar idea goes to waste, I know that I can find another multi-million-dollar idea.
All right. Thank you so much, Black Super Dads. And I'd like to introduce the hosts of Black Super Dads, Dominic Moore-Dunson.
Hello.
And RaJohn Butler.
Hello.
Yes, give it up for them. So I love this combination of thoughtful dialogue and bringing in the comic book aspect that your podcast has, and also because both of you are dads, right? And so there, especially when we think about Black fathers, there are a lot of stereotypes out there about Black fathers. What do you think your podcast is contributing to that conversation? How do you think it might shift how people see Black fathers and Black fatherhood?
So, move a little bit out of the way. So for me, I think it's the idea that, like, as Black people, we're not monolithic. And therefore, as fathers, we're not monolithic. So this conception of fatherhood has to be one thing. It's like, no, it can be what you want it to be. It can be what you want to make it. And I think, you know, the big thing, you know, we talked about in our intro is leaving a legacy, you know, leaving a blueprint that's more than just a last name. So we can have these conversations where we talk about building wealth, you know, what does it mean to have resources? You know, what's truly a resource? What's the power of representation? And we can hand that off to you know, my daughter. When she gets here, I can say, listen, here's something that you can look, and I can preserve our words and our history and our culture. And all of that in its essence is fatherhood. You know, that is being a Black father. So that's what I would say.
So what was the inspiration behind using comic books to get at all of these different issues?
I think me and RaJohn both, we're brother-in-laws, so we spend a lot of time together, especially around the holidays. And as you know, in the last decade or so, Marvel MCU has just exploded. So our love for comic books naturally, and for some of the things that specifically the MCU is going after now, I don't know if anyone's watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but inside of that series are some really interesting, really serious conversations about race, about being a Black man as that relates to America. We've already been having those conversations, right? And so one of the interesting things about comic books is it's art. At its very core, it is art. And the point of art is to bring about conversations that make you think about life from a different angle. So then you can figure out what you want to do with that information. And I think for us, that information and that dialogue and chopping it up like we're in a barber shop and that fun conversation allows us to then decide what we want to tell our kids.
That's so powerful. And it's something that you can, you know, pass on, other people get to pass on as well. I wonder, so you guys say that you have spent a lot of time together, and it's apparent. I mean, you have such a great camaraderie and flow between the two of you in the podcast. But are there things that you've discovered about each other, things that surprised you, or even that you've discovered about yourselves in the process of putting this together?
That's a tough question.
I asked the tough questions.
So I think for me, I think I've discovered the biggest thing is, like, you know, we talk about race and talking about comic books, and it's like that stuff's always been there, you know, and you've taken it in, because if you're reading the X-Men, it's talking about marginalized people, right? And two of the greatest characters in that comic are some people say based upon Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. And so that stuff's always been there. But what I realize is the more and more I talk about it, I'm like, man, so how do we fix it? How do we make it better? What can I do to change the paradigm and the way we think about stuff? So I think that's me. I'm in, like, more solutions focused.
I think for me, I've realized that through our conversations, how much of we're connected and committed to the idea of Black joy. There's just a lot of, like, Black trauma going on right now, and the monetization of Black trauma through film and TV and all these things. And we've been having this ongoing conversation about, we just need that to stop for a second and talk about the things about being Black that we love and the joys we have growing up, comic books, all these things that we love that talk about these serious subjects, but through the lens of passion, of joy, of transparency, vulnerability. And so I think that's something that I've discovered a lot of in our conversations lately.
Well, I can definitely relate to that. I love that you have created a space where we could find that joy. And if you want to continue to nerd out on comic book culture, this is the place to go. So thank you so much, Dom and RaJohn, Black Super Dads.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next podcast is by Ebony Hill. And it's called Real Women Talk with Ebony Hill.
Welcome, sisters, to Real Women Talk. I am your host, Ebony Hill, and this is the space where we will discuss real life, love, and relationship topics that Black women care about today. Real women are fierce. Real women are valuable and vulnerable. Real women learn from each other, and real women know that we are better together. A poem. Who protects the sisters? So many lean on me. We've been taught to hold down the brothers, but who holds down me? We serve our kids, parents, friends, churches, and community. But who stops to think about what I need when I need help for me? We get weary and flat out ready to give up. But when you know the whole world depends on you, you just keep getting right back up. Strong Black women is who we're trained to be. Being a strong Black woman is exhausting, if you ask me. Who protects the sisters when your men are dead and gone? Who protects the sisters when your man is locked up and did no wrong? Who protects the sisters when we have to fight the man? It seems as though the system will do everything it can to destroy the spirit of the Black woman and rip life from the Black man. Who protects the sisters when you've been dealt a bad hand? We lean on our faith and the strength of those who went before us, going all the way back to the motherland. No pity party for the sisters, no crying for me. You better get back up and do what's needed. If it's going to be, it's up to me.
That was Real Women Talk with Ebony Hill. And Ebony, you and I talked a lot about what you were going to be doing. And every time I listen to even just this teaser, it really makes me so emotional because you are touching on so many things that Black women feel that are unspoken, that need to be brought to light. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so powerful, is that it's your story, it's my story, it's so many of us in the lab story, so many women in Akron story, so many women in the United States story. And that's what you've managed to pinpoint. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why it was important for you to land on these particular stories, this particular topic to talk about.
All right, so thank you, hi. So this particular episode is about safe spaces for Black women. And it's needed, it's important. And I think going right behind the super dads, talking about, how we need joy. Well, sometimes we just need a space to be. And in our community, whether it be Akron or in the Black community, you're supposed to be the strong woman. and you get tired of being that person, right? So where do we go to get recharged? I talk about, just escaping from the male gaze, and I don't think we talk about that enough as women, that, we do perform for fellas. I share that, right? But also to escape, the white gaze and what's expected of us. It's like we're always on. So when we want to just stop and breathe and just be me, like I don't want to wear my titles, I don't want to take care of anybody, I don't want to solve any problems, I just want to go be recharged. I want to be around some other sisters and just chill. And it's needed. And from even doing my research, it's a big thing. It's not just something that I came up with. But right now, where we are in history, we're talking all this about, it's Mental Health Month, May. But we need to be intentional about stopping and just being. So it was just really just resonated with me, the stay-at-home order, working from home, all the changes that we've put up with. So what do you do with all of that?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you have to create the space, right? And what's interesting, one of the things that I love about podcasts and the audio media, the medium of audio listening, is that it's so intimate, right? You doing that poem creates that intimacy. Now we feel like we're just in your living room, sitting on the couch with you, chilling, just listening to Ebony give the poem, right? That's so powerful and speaks to us. Can you talk a little bit about what's at stake for you in doing this podcast? And I think one of the interesting things that people might not know is that you plan to take this into real space.
Oh, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so what's at stake for me is like I've scratched something, and I didn't really know what I was uncovering at the time, but the more I talk about it, even some of the reactions from the audience today, it's needed, right? So it's like now you're here, and this is a mantle, right? So I'm going to carry it on, and I'm going to seek out spaces. There's some spaces here locally, and just connect. So I feel like it's a way to reveal maybe some gems that we don't know about in the community, but also, again, to encourage people to create their own spaces, right? So whether it be 2 people, 10 people, doesn't matter, but it's something that's important. And one of the comments I remember from, I think, one of the fellows in the class was that, listening to this, maybe if you didn't know you needed a safe space, or maybe it was one of the sisters, I don't know, but it said that now you do. So it's like, oh, I need a space. So now that we've uncovered the fact that it's needed, we got to seek them out. So I'm going to be looking for spaces. So if you have a safe space, let me know.
Well, even though you don't yet, we're going to put it out in the universe, so you're going to get that space.
Yes.
But you've created a virtual space for Black women, and I just want to say that I truly appreciate that, and I know that many other women do. So thank you for seeing us, for hearing us, for reflecting ourselves back to ourselves. Thank you, Ebony.
Thank you. That's dope.
Okay. Now we have the next podcast is also by Ebony, but Ebanee Bond. And this podcast is called Unboxing Resonant Futures.
What's up? Welcome to Unboxing a Resonant Future. My name is Ebanee Bond, and I am your narrator, host, performer, and curious young professional. If you like hearing how other people went about finding their life's purpose, get prepared to be served up some inspiration. On this show, we will be covering everything from creativity and entrepreneurship to justice and community. This episode, titled A Black Bond, features my brother and a couple of objective narrators and reveals how a few of my childhood experiences growing up on the L Block in Mansfield, Ohio, have influenced some of my views of community and justice. Come on. Simon says, perform. Simon says, touch your ears. Simon says, perform. Touch your heart. Shooting jumpers around the world at the park. Candy stores on the block. Hide and seek after D-I-R-K, dark, dark, dark.
just some good vibes, man. Just good vibes, man. It's just hard to explain. Just great vibes. You gotta be from there to really know.
Imaginations and adventures like no other. Playing house, pretending to be somebody's daughter. Now, I might have been a baby's kid, but I always had enough. I had enough aunts on my block. Shoot, about 6. I had enough cousins, 7 times 76. Multiple generations, close relatives, and many community relations. Counting down the days to traditions and holiday celebrations.
It was like a big family event that everybody looked forward to in the summer, you know. There's gonna be 10, 15 cars lined up on Lily Street, and we all finna go to Cedar Point and have a good time.
I had enough after school programs and games and kids to play. Adventures for days.
The services provided by park and recreation departments are more than fun and games, are gym and swim programs. They are opportunities for physical and psychological safety. Supportive, compassionate relationships. Support for effectiveness and mattering. Confidence building. Nurturing positive self-identity. Skill building, and more.
Maybe not.
All right.
Hi.
We are now unboxed.
Yeah. Maybe.
Oh my gosh, Ebony, what people won't know about your podcast is the journey itself that got you to this point, because you had a very different idea when you started.
About 50.
She really did, though. But I love that. Like, the creativity was just bursting out of you. And actually, even though it's different, I still stand by that you are still doing this type of fictional storytelling with a non-fiction story, if that makes any sense. Yeah, you still manage to capture the feel of telling a story that is futuristic but present and mixes all of these different elements. Data, you're putting in poetry. I mean, it's so you're so multifaceted. So, and you do a lot of work in the community. For you, the community matters a lot. So tell us a little bit about how this podcast is connected to the community and the work that you do in the community.
Okay, so first I want to say this has been a great experience. They have been phenomenal. I've changed so many things 1,050 times, but it was a safe space. Nobody judged me for it. It wasn't like, you're supposed to have this done. It was like super open, so I want to start with that. But I say it connects to the community. So I'm from Mansfield, and this is obviously the plot is in Mansfield. But one time I was talking to Councilman Russ Neal, and it might have been towards the end of me graduating college and becoming a young professional. And I said, well, I'm kind of concerned that I'm not from Akron. And so showing up in spaces to try to like advocate for Akron, I'm wondering if I'm overstepping some kind of, boundary. And he said, well, you're Black and you have where you grow up, and it's the same experience wherever you go. So that, even though I'm talking about something from my childhood, I still know what that experience is like growing up in, whatever the hood is, I guess. So I think with the pieces where the objective narrator comes in, they're highlighting different, things that I'm talking about, but putting a different level of perspective on it. And so I'm hoping that when people listen to it, they can kind of reflect, as John was saying, on the art, and think about how it applies to their life or maybe their work or how they show up in the world.
And I love that, because in it, you're kind of challenging what that person said to you about Black people basically being a monolith, right?
Yeah. So I think, another piece is,
So there, at the end of the audio on when y'all listen to when the actual podcast drops,
right.
yeah, the lady asks, after she's talking about park and recreation, she's saying, well, do we give kids and even ourselves as adults enough time for a communal play or communal dancing? And so my answer is like, maybe we don't. And I think that when it comes to, being a human, that's literally like being a human. That's what being a human is.
It's the natural thing of what kids are supposed to do.
Yeah, and adults, like, why just kids? Like, I want to play.
You're right, you're
right. I don't even, can you repeat the question?
Well, I just made an observation that with raising all of these different issues and the perspectives that you're talking about, you're challenging the idea that Black people are a monolith.
Yeah. I think, and I could be wrong, but I'm guessing when people meet me, they don't know where to place me. They don't know if I come from the hood. They don't know if I come from middle class, upper class, whatever it is. And I grew up in the hood, and I still had a beautiful experience. Like, I had a beautiful experience. And so whatever people think about the hood, I'm just like, I think you're wrong. Yeah.
I love that. What was the most interesting thing that you discovered in this process? Because like I said, you've gone on a journey.
I'm a processor, so I don't know.
You have to get back to us on that.
Yeah, and I think one thing is that being comfortable with whatever my process is. So I literally had 3 different outlines for podcasts and what all the points were going to be and all of that, and it can be hard, like, oh my God, I should have had this done, I missed the deadline or whatever. But if that's what it takes for me to get to the end point, then that's literally how my human thing does it, and I can't judge it, compared to
And it turned out beautifully.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Ebony.
Yeah, thank you.
Unboxing Resident Features.
Yes.
Okay, we are down to our last podcast, last but not least. And unfortunately, our last podcaster could not be with us this evening because her daughter is graduating, and we weren't going to keep her from that. But we do have some thoughts from her. Before we get started, we will play a snippet. This is Joy Gadson's podcast, Joy for the Journey.
Hello, my fellow travelers. This is Joy, and I would like to welcome you to Joy for the Journey. So let our journey begin. In recent years, there has been an awakening of sorts where we have started to acknowledge that representation matters. But my question for you today is this: what happens when those who are designated to represent you do not recognize your identity within the larger group? So let me tell you my story. I grew up in a small suburban town I call and describe as Mayberry RFD. You see, it was a sort of town that had one stoplight, one gas station, one elementary school, one grocery store, one you fill in the blank. And let's take it a step further. If you drove through the downtown and blinked, you absolutely missed it. And much like Mayberry, there were very few minorities or people of color. In short, there were very few people who looked like me. And as a child, I became accustomed to being the only in the room, and by default, the authority in all things Black. So let me just stop for a second and say this. Can you imagine an 8-year-old having to shoulder the burden of speaking for a culture, a group of people with who you don't really have a connection? Don't get me wrong, I did have interactions with those who look like me, and that typically took place on Sundays. However, even when those interactions did occur, I was still made to feel less than because of where I grew up. So on one hand, I didn't really have anyone who looked like me, and I had to shoulder the burden of being the authority on all things Black. And on the other hand, when I did have interactions with people who looked like me, I was made to feel less than because of where I grew up and not having the same experiences as they had. So with that being said, I began to apologize. I apologize for not being Black enough, not having the typical Black experience. And the pattern of apologizing followed me well into my adulthood. I can recall one of my first dates with my ex-husband. We went to go see the movie Training Day.
What can you prove, huh? Nothing. Where's your evidence, huh? It's right there.
And one scene in the movie, the Denzel Washington character, I believe, shot someone with a sawed-off shotgun. And not understanding how guns worked, I leaned over and I asked him, "Hey, babe, I see the guy was shot with one bullet. So why does he have 17 holes on him?" He looked at me and asked if I was serious. And of course I said yes, because I was absolutely serious. And he leaned down the row to the other couples who were with us, told them what I said, and it just seemed like all their heads were on the same swivel, and they all looked at me at the same time and laughed loudly. So needless to say, by the time we left the movie theater, I became known as the Black White Girl. So let me just stop for a second and just say this. Can you imagine the same group of people who I so desperately wanted to identify with neglected to even acknowledge who I was because of, you guessed it, not being Black enough?
That was Joy for the Journey. And again, in lieu of Joy being with us here tonight, I had the chance to talk to her beforehand. So what we're going to hear now is my conversation and pointed questions about her journey. Well, hello, Joy Gadson. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, Ella?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
So we just finished listening to a clip from your podcast, Joy for the Journey. And what's really interesting about you is that you are actually an author, and your book is also named Joy for the Journey.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your book and how it's related to your podcast?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, the book is called Joy for the Journey. It is a 90-day inspirational, but it's not an inspirational as most people would think. It's more so to inspire, to motivate, to allow you to find joy in whatever phase of your journey of life that you're in. So that's how it relates to the podcast as well.
And what inspired you to create this, to write the book and then to turn it into a podcast?
What inspired me was just my own personal journey. Last year, everyone knows pandemic, a lot of life happened, a lot of change happened. And even for me, a lot of change happened. And it took that change, that sitting down aha moment that I had was like, sit down. How do you define yourself? Who are you? And I began my own personal journey. And in that, I began to find joy, no pun intended, but I began to find joy in my journey and began to become comfortable with who I am and okay with me. It took a long time to get there, but I'm happy that I'm there.
I feel like that's something that most of us struggle with throughout our entire lives. So I'm so impressed that you have managed to find that. And that's exactly why people need to listen to your podcast. So Speaking of that, who are the people who should be listening to your podcast? Who's your target audience, would you say?
My target audience, I believe, I shouldn't say I believe, I know are women, women who have just struggled with life. Now, not to exclude men, because we don't want to leave them out either.
No,
however,
we can make a little space for them on the side.
Yeah, they'll have something eventually. But right now, just women who have experienced life, who have lived life, and who need to find a space to say, I'm okay. So in this podcast, it's me giving them permission, right? Giving you permission to say, I'm okay. And I'm not always mother, I'm not always sister, I'm not always auntie, grandma, all the different hats that we wear, but I am me. So that is the target audience that I'm going for.
I love that. And just giving ourselves permission to show up as who we are, even though we wear all these hats, I think is so powerful. Yes. So my last quick question for you, Joy, is what has been some of the joy that you found? Share that with us. Maybe your the thing that you found that maybe most surprised you about being in joy.
That there's comfort and joy. I think that is the thing that surprised me the most. I'm a person who, my friends call me the to-do list chick, right? I always have a to-do list. I'm always running. I'm always moving. I'm always busy. But in that, having the opportunity in this past year to just slow down and sit down and really take in all of the moments and finding joy in all of the moments, that has been the most surprising for me. And surprisingly enough, I kind of like it. I'm tired of being busy. I don't want to be busy anymore.
Sometimes you just got to take a step back, right?
Right. And so it's okay. So even in that, giving myself permission. So before I can give anyone else permission, I had to start with me. And I've given myself permission to slow down, to enjoy, to exhale, to breathe, and just take life in all its moments, the good, the bad, the ups and downs, and find joy in every moment that is given to me.
That's such a powerful message. Thank you so much, Joy, for sharing that with us. Once again, this is Joy Gadson, who is the creator and host of Joy for the Journey.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so that was our last podcast. And I want to take a note from Joy and say to Joy, Charlee, Ebony, Dom, RaJohn, and John, that I hope this has been a great journey for each of you. I know that I've said many times that I have so enjoyed being on this journey with each of you. And what you have created is so powerful. I'm so excited for people to hear the fullness of all that you have to offer. And for everyone else, also take a message from Joy. Pause for a moment, check out each of these people's podcasts, listen to it fully, take in their message, share it with other people so that they can hear the messages that and the stories that we have birthed here tonight and that these folks have worked so hard to produce. So one more round of applause for all of our podcasters, please. And to close this out, I'm going to ask Erika to come back and give us some closing remarks.
Thanks, Ella, and thanks to all of you for tonight. And there are a few people who have worked very hard behind the scenes for us who you haven't seen and you haven't heard from, but we wouldn't be here without them. So I want to make sure to give a couple of shout outs. First to two of them who are here. Matt Wilson, our program consultant, who was there every night and pulled this all together. And then Joaquin Cutler, our producer, who helped everybody get their stories in great shape. And we're so happy to have them. And then also, back at home on the Futuro team, we have Julio Ricardo Varela, our guru, podcast host, founder of Latino Rebels, and also one of my most esteemed colleagues who helped to guide this process all the way through and who believed in the Podcast Lab. And then our Podcast Lab assistant, Grace Varela, who's one of the most organized and together people I know and who was always a cheerleader for us and for this process. And then our promotional friends, I guess that's what I'll call them, Stacy Parker Lamel, Megan Rapp, and also Luis Luna. They got the information out there, put together everything, and made sure that it was shared all over. They are just an amazing team, and we wouldn't be doing this without them, and you wouldn't know about it without them. And last, I want to thank the Knight Foundation for their generous support for this program. It has been an amazing trip. I am in love with Akron now. I'm in love with the work that all of you have done. And because it wouldn't be right for a person from Harlem to close this out, Akronites, Ace and Angie,
Well, all right. So hope you guys at home had a great time checking out our lovely and awesome and super dope podcasters, man. Give it up one more time. One more time. Again, I want to thank the Summit Art Space for allowing us to be in the building. Our office is here where we do shameless plug, BU Podcasting. You can check us out at bupodcasting.com. We have Ebony Hill already on there. John Smith is already on there. Everyone here is invited to be a part of that as well. Listen, we got food in the back. We got music getting ready to go. Sorry, people at home, you're going to miss this part. But listen, 140 East Market, come down here, check out the art, check out the galleries. We're doing good. Anything you want to say? We got anything?
No, we're good.
We're good? Nia Allen? Good. Thank you guys. Have a good night.